But the first order of business in the world of politics, because I don't know if y'all saw what the hell happened on TV today. Live national television, live international television as well. Y'all got to see this if y'all haven't said it, because that's exactly where I'm getting started. It's in the nation's capital, where the nation saw President Donald Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance have a testy exchange with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. It all happened in front of reporters during their meeting at the White House this afternoon with the cameras rolling. Keep that in mind. During the meeting, Trump called the Ukrainian president disrespectful, end quote, and said, quote, "You don't have the cards," end quote, when it comes to resolving the current war versus Russia. Just to put this in perspective, there's 3 minutes of video. Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you, it is worth every second for you to listen to this. I did not want to take this out. It's going to be about 3 minutes. It is worth listening to this exchange between Zelensky, Vice President Vance, and President Trump in the Oval Office with the cameras rolling for the nation to see live. Check it out.
What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media. Right now, you guys are going around and forcing conscripts to the front lines because you have manpower problems. You should be thanking the president for trying to bring an end to this conflict.
Have you ever been to Ukraine that you say what problems we have?
I have been to.
Come once.
I've actually watched and seen the stories, and I know what happens is you bring them on a propaganda tour, Mr. President. Do you disagree that you've had problems bringing people into your military? And do you think that it's respectful to come to the Oval Office of the United States of America and attack the administration that is trying to prevent the destruction of your country?
A lot of questions. Let's start from the beginning.
Sure.
First of all, during the war, everybody has problems, even you, but you have nice ocean and don't feel now, but you will feel it in the future. God bless.
You don't know that.
God bless. God bless. You will not have a war.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that.
That's
Remember
exactly
this. You're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel. We're going to feel very good.
You will feel influence.
We're going to feel very good and very strong.
You will feel influence.
You're right now not in a very good position. You've allowed yourself to be in a very bad position, and he happens to be right about it.
From the very beginning of the war.
You're not in a good position. You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having cards.
Cards.
Right now, you don't. You're playing cards. You're playing cards. You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III. And what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country. That's back to you. Far more than a lot of people said they should have.
Have you said thank you once? This entire meeting? No, in this entire meeting, have you said thank you? You went to Pennsylvania and campaigned for the opposition in October. Offer some words of appreciation for the United States of America and the president who's trying to save your country.
Please, you think that if you will speak very loudly about the war, you can...
He's not speaking loudly. He's not speaking loudly. Your country is in big trouble.
Can I answer?
Wait a minute. No. You've done a lot of talking. Your country is in big trouble.
I know.
You're not winning. You're not winning this. You have a damn good chance of coming out okay because of us.
Mr. President, we are staying in our country, staying strong from the very beginning of the war. We've been alone, and we are thankful. I said thanks
you haven't
in
been
this
alone.
cabinet,
you
and
haven't
not
been
only
alone.
in this cabinet.
We gave you, through this stupid president, $350 billion.
You voted
we gave
for
you
your
military equipment, and your men are brave, but they had to use our military.
What about
if you didn't have our military equipment, this war would have been over in 2 weeks.
In 3 days. I heard it from Putin. In 3 days. This is something
maybe
new.
Less.
In 2 weeks. Of course, yes.
It's going to be a very hard thing to do business like this.
Shortly afterwards, Zelensky left the White House without signing a deal for the U.S. to receive revenue from Ukraine's mineral supply in exchange for military assistance. President Trump said he's, quote, determined that President Zelensky is not ready for peace if America is involved, end quote. I'm pro-America. Let me get that out the way first. I'm an American citizen, and I'm going to try to give us the benefit of the doubt, knowing that we have an abundance of flaws as a nation in terms of our historical involvement in foreign affairs. There is no doubt about that. On one hand, there are two sides to this story. On one hand, if you're President Zelensky for Ukraine, who did campaign, I shouldn't say campaign, but was very supportive, as Vice President Vance pointed out, very supportive of the Biden administration because they did give you over $350 million. They did give you nearly $500 million worth of weapons, or they committed to that. Knowing the level of support that the Biden administration had given to Ukraine, how vociferous Biden was in his support for Ukraine. And by the way, that's going across the aisle because you got Senator Lindsey Graham on the Republican side that has also been an avid supporter of Ukraine and their mission to ward off Russia taking over their sovereign territory. I would look at Zelensky and I would say, not very smart to be butting heads with this administration and this White House at that particular moment in time. Trump is not wrong when he said you don't have all the cards. You don't have the cards. He's absolutely right about that because Zelensky does not. Ukraine does not. It's projected that over 1 million lives have been lost. Vast majority of them being from Ukraine. And when you're in a war-torn country and you don't have the muscle and the might, and Russia has already been gaining ground, it might behoove you to come across as a bit more cordial with the present president of the United States. Fair enough. That does not negate the fact that Trump and Vance came across as bullies. It does not negate the fact that Vance brought up something as trivial, talking about you should say thank you, and accusing him of being disrespectful when Vance was the one that was talking. And then Zelensky, they said, it's your turn to speak. And Zelensky said, hey, have you been to Ukraine? Do you know how many people? We're in a war. We're experiencing it. And when he asked Vice President Vance had he been there, he stumbled before acknowledging he hadn't been there. He had read and saw footage of what's happening in Ukraine. It's safe to say that's not the same as being there. And for me personally, I didn't look at Zelensky as disrespectful. I looked at him trying to get in a word because I looked at the vice president chastising him for not being grateful. And the president piggybacking off of that to pounce on him some more about not understanding his plight and being thankful for the ceasefire that America has intervened to try and negotiate so this war between Russia and Ukraine can come to an end. Now, is it wrong for President Trump to finagle his way into the proceedings to get some of their minerals in exchange for U.S. support or in an effort to recoup something for what they've given out to Ukraine? Not at all. As the United States of America, we're giving and giving and giving. Those are taxpayer dollars. We have a right to get something in return if we can pull it off. I get that part. I'm not disagreeing with President Trump about that. See, this is where the centrist in me comes in. I'm not siding with Trump just because I got conservative views, and I'm not siding with Zelensky just because I have liberal views. I'm siding with common sense. Zelensky, knowing how much you need America's support, you need to be a bit more cordial and play a little nicer than that. The flip side to it is that he's at war. He has to depart from the United States of America, go back to Ukraine in a war-torn country with bombs being dropped on his people, on his territory. And he's saying, wait a minute. Y'all are talking to me like I should have no sensitivity to my plight or to my people and should just throw up my arms and surrender and capitulate to what Trump has negotiated. Let's hold on for a second here. During the Obama administration in 2014, Russia did take over Crimea, if I remember correctly. That did happen. And when they took over Crimea, that was a part of Ukraine. Now it's established as Russian territory. And for Russia to start this war with Ukraine, to take over parts of mainland Ukraine, they're right there to do it. And Zelensky was interrupted when he was making the point that when we negotiated back then, the negotiation that involved France, England, and others said it was going to be a ceasefire. Putin disavowed that, ignored it, and ultimately restarted war in 2022. So what he's saying is a ceasefire isn't enough now. We need security that we don't have to concern ourselves with Putin ultimately invading more of our territory moving forward. To just stop the fighting for the time being, he can't be trusted. And what Trump and them is saying is, well, you better trust him by trusting us, because this is the best that you're going to get. Well, the Ukrainians are saying we at war now. We on death's door. We might as well go down swinging. Ladies and gentlemen, who are we to argue with that position? Who are we to argue with that position? This man is the leader of Ukraine. Despite the fact that, quote unquote, according to Trump, they are losing the war, there is no doubt that they have fought valiantly. Even Trump admitted their soldiers have fought valiantly, albeit with U.S. weapons. I don't want to hear that. They fought valiantly. That's what they did. Putin is considered a dictator, has been labeled a murderer and all of this other stuff, and the only person that speaks glowingly about him is Trump. I'm talking about what he says. I'm not talking about what he does, because I don't have all the intel about what he's done with or for Russia. But come on. This man, Zelensky, is at war defending the very survival of his nation. And he's telling you that a ceasefire ain't going to cut the mustard because this man, Putin, has ignored ceasefire agreement before. And what he needs is security that the war will come to an end, and it won't be a ceasefire. It will be protection by the involvement of the United States or anybody else to ensure that he no longer attacks, not that he just stops for the time being. And he's saying that this agreement doesn't provide that. And we're going to engage in condemnation about this man and be petty and talk about how you come into the Oval Office in the United States of America. Well, sir, how did he do that? President Trump. How did he do that? Vice President Vance. He didn't come into the Oval Office on his own. By the way, he didn't have his interpreter either. He came in there by himself. And y'all are interrupting him. Listen, that's like me speaking Spanish or French. If I know the language a little bit, could you at least be quiet and let me speak? Because it's a challenge for me to speak your language. It's a challenge for him to speak fluent English. It's a challenge for him to make sure that he cogently and fluidly gets his thoughts across. Could you have let him finish speaking? Vance didn't do that. Trump didn't do that. So no, Zelensky didn't handle it right. And no, he should not have been as cantankerous. As a politician, as a leader, you have to be a bit more composed than that. Guilty as charged. But that ain't his Oval Office. That's ours. The person residing in it is Donald Trump, is the president of the United States, with Vance there. Zelensky ain't there without their invite. Those cameras are not there without Trump and his administration's invite. They allowed that environment to exist. This isn't Zelensky in Ukraine facilitating all of this. This was them. And we gonna just look at him like he's the villain? Can we at least acknowledge that there must be a level of understanding to the fact that the man is fighting for Ukraine's very survival as a sovereign nation? And that the circumstances upon which he's living and which he's scheduled to go back to is not the same as President Trump and Vice President Vance and what they have to deal with here in the United States of America? They may have been right in some of the things that they were saying, but they were also bullies. And this man, who's literally on the battlefield, responded, whether it's a soldier or a general or whatever, that's how he responded. Because they ain't the ones that got bombs being dropped on them. He does. On their hospitals, on their schools, on child care facilities, everywhere. I'm sorry. I'm not saying that President Trump and Vice President Vance was totally wrong in the things that they were saying. Once again, the art of decorum and decency play a role in all of this. You could actually do both and be right. You didn't have to do that. For all we know, Zelensky might be dead in a month for a bomb being dropped on some place where he's at. We ain't worried about that with President Trump and Vice President Vance. America hasn't lost nearly 1 million lives in this war over the last 2 years. I mean, damn. That's all I'm saying. We ain't talking politics, conservative, liberal. We're talking about leadership from our statesmen, the President of the United States, and how that was handled. It looked elementary. It was embarrassing. And Zelensky didn't handle it right. But if your country was being bombed into oblivion and you needed assistance, and the President of the United States was speaking more favorably about Putin than he was about you, and then you were getting lectured by the vice president who's never been to Ukraine, who hasn't seen the war-torn territory, and he's getting on you for not being grateful, how would you have reacted? I don't know an answer to that question, but I know it's a legitimate damn question.